Alright everyone, welcome to another video that talks about page templating. Today we are going to be building off of what we did in the last video, which showed us how to create editable regions and page properties for a standard PCF file. We're going to be using the same files that we used in the last video, so if you're following along in this series, make sure that you've got your PCF and XSL files kept in the same format that they were at by the end of the last video. What we have now is a fully formed and functional PCF. So what we're going to do in this video is taking that functional PCF and going ahead and turning it into a new page template so we can start making pages that look just like it. As we can see here in OU Campus, I still have my simple PCF and simple XSL that we used in the last video. But if I wanted to create some new web pages here and I tried to click the new button, I have no options. I have no templates with which I can use to actually create new web pages. I would have to build them entirely from scratch if I wanted to make new ones, or I would just have to simply copy this page. But neither of those options are very desirable. What we want to do is we want to make this process as easy as possible. So we want to go ahead and make a new page template. So in OU Campus, making templates requires a couple files that don't really come into play unless we're actually talking about templates. So the first one of these template files, is called a TMPL, which is essentially the base content of the new page that we want to make with our new page template. I always like to think of TMPLs as a generic PCF. The TMPL looks very similar to the PCF, and it contains a lot of the general structure of the page. It's still got the PCF style sheet declaration up at the top in the prologue, so we know what XSL file is going to be used to render it. It has editable regions, it has page properties. The real difference between a TMPL and a PCF is that the editable regions and other content areas or other things that are going to be configured on a page-to-page basis, such as page properties, are going to be empty. And that way, when we make the new page, it's not pre-filled with the existing content. It's pretty much a blank slate, so we can add the information that's going to change every time we want to make a new page. So the TMPL file is the first one that we're going to be making today. And our first step is to take our PCF and turn it into a TMPL file. And it's very simple. What we're going to do is we're just going to go to the source of our PCF. And let me just quickly change my display type here and increase some text size for our source viewer here. It just makes things a little bit more clear and a little more visible. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take my simple.pcf and I'm going to click Save As. And then I'm going to navigate to the directory inside of our site that contains our template files, or more accurately, will contain our template files since there's nothing in there yet. So for most people, it can vary depending on your personal preferences, but for most situations, that folder is going to be at _resources/OU/templates. And then what we're going to do is just going to change it from simple.pcf to simple.tmpl. The beauty of PCFs and TMPLs being very similar is that they're both XML documents, and if you just change the file extension, OU Campus recognizes them as being different, but there's no functional difference between the two files right now. But now that we've saved it as a TMPL file, as we can see, the path is up here. We now know that we're in our templates folder as opposed to where we were with our existing PCF beforehand. What we're going to go ahead and do is we want to ensure that our new pages start with a blank slate content-wise. So let's go into the source of our TMPL file, which is we're here already, and we're going to go ahead and delete all the content inside of both of our editable regions, because every page that I create, I don't want to have these headings and all of this example content in here. I want those regions to be blank, so when I make my new page, I can just fill it with that information that I want, as opposed to trying to go ahead and delete the content that was in there in the first place. We're just saving ourselves another additional step here. But we do want to make sure that we're keeping our editable regions intact, as well as the OUC editor element here, because we still want to be able to use our custom CSS styling from styles.txt. So now that that's done, we also want to make sure that the page parameters that we added in the last video, we want that information to vary with every new page that we create as well. So it's not just the editable region content. What we want to do too is we also want to go to our parameter elements, and I'm going to go ahead and delete the content that's inside of those elements. So we've got our heading. Now that heading is going to be blank. And also the image that's in our banner image, we'll just delete the dependency tag from there. Same thing goes with the metadata. So, depending on what page we create, the metadata may also vary. So I'm going to delete what's in the title element, as well as the value of the content attribute for my description. So all of my title, all of my description, my parameters, my editable regions, all of those things are blank at this point. So let's go ahead and save the TMPL again. At this point, we've kind of done, half of the process to getting our generic PCF ready to go. But for right now, we're just going to leave this file as it is. And you might be kind of wondering how these things like title and page heading get added to our new page when you create it. Right now, it's blank, which is great. That's kind of the first part. But how do we get the new information populated into those areas? Well, that's what we're going to be doing. That's what we're going to be doing with our second file, as well as when we revisit this TMPL later on in this video. So before we get into revisiting this file, we have to move away from it, and we're going to start talking about the second file that we need to create new page templates, which we call the TCF. The TCF stands for Template Control File, and if you've ever created a new page in OU Campus, you've actually interacted with the TCF before. The form that users fill out when they choose a new page template after clicking that new button is actually generated by the TCF file. You might also hear it called a new page wizard. Those things are the same. Each form element in that new page wizard that you see when you click the new template corresponds to what's called a variable in the TCF, and the value for that variable is then what actually gets sent to our TMPL file, which is where we get that new information for when we create our new stuff. So, without further explanation here, let's go ahead and build a TCF for our template. I'm going to hop back into my templates directory here. As you can see, we've got our simple.tmpl right there to go. Hypothetically, you could build out a new TCF by copying an existing one, and this is just changing a little bit of information around. But first of all, I don't have any TCFs in my templates folder right now, and I also want to make sure that we're building one from scratch so we have a little bit more of a complete understanding of what actually goes into creating one. So to get a blank file that will become our TCF, let's actually go ahead into the TMPL file again. And we're going to go ahead and just click Save As one more time. But this time, instead of creating it as simple.tmpl or moving it to a different directory, I'm going to keep it in the same directory, and I'm just going to rename it simple.tcf. Now at this point, this is not what a TCF should look like. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to delete everything except for the XML declaration up at the top of our file, because even though we call it a TCF, it is still technically an XML file, so we want to make sure that OU Campus understands that. Alright, so let's just quickly save that so we know that we've got this. In previous videos, we kind of discussed in the foundation of XML when Eve was talking about it that all XML files need what's called kind of a root node or a document node inside which all other nodes in the XML file exist. For our PCF and TMPL files, that was the, if I undo this really quickly, that was this document element right here on line 4, and 5 and 6 in this example. However, for a TCF, that root node is just simply called TCF. So we need to make that first before we do anything else, because that root node is going to contain the rest of our file. So there we go. We've got our TCF element here. And now let's go ahead and start kind of building it out. Inside the TCF element is where we actually start building out the TCF itself, or what we call the new page wizard. All TCFs have at the very least 3 child elements inside of here. The first one is going to be title. The second one is called variable list. variable dash list. We'll make some space between that one. And then the third one is called template list. There are a couple more elements that you can put right off of the root node. In this example, since we're making a very simple TCF that corresponds to a very simple TMPL file, we don't necessarily need those, but there are a couple others. So if you're curious about those, go ahead and refer to our support site. We have full documentation of some of these extra kind of optional elements that can exist within our TCF here. So I've added these in order. They're blank right now. Let's just go ahead and talk about what each of these mean in order. The title element right here is just a simple name for our template that's going to show up at the top of the new page wizard. It's just, just like any other title. Let's go ahead and just add a template name inside of it here. I'm going to call this a simple new page. The next element that we have here is called variable list, and the variable list element is where each one of the form elements that we actually see in the new page wizard are going to appear. And each one of the form elements that shows up in the new page wizard is going to be its own variable element inside of this kind of parent node of variable list. So for each one of those things, we're going to go ahead and each question that we ask, we want to have a variable node. So let's go ahead and start building this out. We'll talk about template lists once we finish this. So first of all, I'm going to make an XML element called variable right here. And just kind of similarly to page properties, if you remember from our previous video, there are a couple attributes that we need to add to this variable element in order for it to fully function. So the one that's really mandatory is the attribute that's called name. And the name attribute is just a unique label for this particular variable, which we'll be referencing later on, and I'll show you how that looks. But it's very similar to the label attribute inside of OUC div, or the name attribute inside of the parameter options that we talked about in the previous video. So I'm going to give this a name. For each one of these variables, once again, that's corresponding to a question that we're asking. And the first question that I want to ask for our new page that we're creating is what the page title is going to be, something that's pretty standard. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm just going to give it the name of title. And that wraps up the ones that are mandatory for the variable element, but there are also, once again, some others that are extremely important when it comes to helping your users understand what to do with this form element, essentially. So the first thing that we have to do is we got a type declaration. And this is, very similar to the type declaration that we used for page properties in the previous video. So, you have pretty much the same options. You have type equals text for a text field, type equals select for a drop-down menu, type equals radio, type equals checkbox for those two things respectively. You have type equals file chooser, type equals asset, and then also type equals date time for a date time picker. So, most of these types are the same ones that we've already explained. For this one, since I'm just asking for a page title, all I need to do is type equals text. Next, I'm going to have a prompt attribute. And prompt functions the same as in page properties, so this is just going to be a label for this element that the users will actually see. So I'm just going to call this page title. And then finally alt text. And alt text is going to be, once again, helper text that appears underneath the field, so we can help our users out to understand, what's actually being used, or what this data is going to be used for on the actual page. So I'm just going to say add your page title. This will show up as the title in our browser tab and also in search engines. Alright, awesome. So we've essentially built out our first variable here. There's one other optional attribute that I want to add to this variable element, and it's I'm actually going to put it right here at the beginning, and it's called section. The section attribute is, once again, it's just a cosmetic type of thing that you can use to kind of organize and label groups of variables. So if we kind of harken back to the previous video where we had two different OUC properties elements, one of which had the label of config and the other one that had the label of metadata, and you know how that grouped the parameters that were inside of each of those under a nice little heading on the page properties screen. That's essentially what section does. When you click on the new page wizard and the form opens up, you're just going to have, a heading with a little horizontal rule underneath it, and whatever you put in the value of this section attribute is going to show up as what that heading is. So if I put the section attribute here on our first variable, that means that this heading is going to show up above this particular element inside the new page wizard. So I'm just going to say metadata, because I'm asking for metadata with the page title here. If we move on, I'm going to create a couple more variables. Since we're in the metadata section, I'm going to make another variable here. And inside of that, I'm going to give this one the name of description. So we'll ask for the page description. Once again, this is another situation where I'm just asking for a text field. I don't need anything else, so I'm just going to do the type equals text declaration here. However, since this is a description and it potentially has a little bit more text than a simple page title or something along those lines, we can do the optional attribute of rows, and this just determines how large of a text field we're going to be getting represented by the number of lines of text that can be shown at one time. So if I do rows equals 3, that means that the text box will be large enough to show 3 lines of text at once, and then a scroll bar can appear, so instead of it just being one single long string of text. Once again, I'll add a prompt. Description, and some alt text here that says, let's go ahead and say add your description. This will show up in page metadata and search results. So there we go. So now I've added both of my pieces of metadata that I'm collecting, and you'll notice that I don't have the section attribute here on this variable, and that is simply because if I don't have a section attribute, then it's just going to be under the same section that was declared earlier. So, description will still be underneath the metadata heading. But now, on to my next variable. Now I'm going to add another section because I've moved on from metadata. I don't need to collect any more metadata here. This is going to be more custom page settings type stuff. So we're going to take the same two properties that we declared inside of our PCF in the last video, and we're going to have those be configurable options when the user creates the new page. So instead of having to create the new page, then manually go to page properties and adjust those parameters, we're going to give them the ability to adjust those parameters as they're creating the page to once again streamline the process and make it go a little bit quicker. So I'm just going to call this custom page settings. My name for this one is let's get the banner image added here. So I'll just call this one image. I'm going to do type. Type is a little bit different here because now we're going to be choosing a file. So I'll choose type equals file chooser. And then because I'm using the type equals file chooser declaration there, I also get to use the optional attribute of dependency. And this one is just going to control whether I'm using a dependency tag or not when I insert my file into the new page wizard. So I'm going to do dependency equals dm-tag, and that essentially means dependency equals yes, use the dependency manager tags when I insert my images. Prompt equals banner image. essentially what I'm doing here is I'm almost just replicating all of the page properties almost word for word, except for, instead of calling them parameters or something like that, I'm calling them variables. So, the creation process for TCF variables and the creation process for page properties are pretty similar. Lots of the same attributes and lots of the same syntax. Okay, awesome. You'll notice that I'm not asking for the page heading, and the reason why I'm not asking for the page heading as a separate variable here, I'll explain later on once we finish building out our TCF, but essentially the principle is I'm already asking for the page title, and it would probably follow that in most cases, the page title is going to probably also want to be reflected in the banner image. So what I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to have the user enter in the data once in the new page wizard, but it'll be populated in two different places once we kind of build out the rest of our TCF and show you how it interacts with our TMPL file. But the final variable that I'm going to ask for is I'm going to just ask for the new file name of the file that we're creating here. So once again, I'll have another section here, and that section is going to be page configuration. The name is going to be called PCF file name. What we're doing with this is we're going to be, actually grabbing the new file name of the PCF file that I'm creating. And type is going to be text here. That's simple. Prompt. Oops. Prompt here is going to be file name. And then alt is some helper text. Add the file name for your new page. And in this case, since I know I have a naming convention enforced for all of my file names, I'm just going to repeat the naming convention here in the alt text so people know right off the bat what characters they can use. Numbers, underscores, dashes, and periods. Awesome. I will end my variable tag. And actually in this one, most of the others, as you can see, I've left the variable elements actually blank. And that's just because I don't want to pre-fill any text into any of those. But for the file name, I'm just going to have just like a starter file name injected in here. So I'll just do something like new file. Obviously, the users can take and delete this when they actually fill out the new page wizard. This is just kind of up to personal preference. You can do this or you can just leave it blank. It's really up to you. Okay, so at this point, I've added every question that I want to ask into my new page wizard. They're all variable elements within this kind of parent variable list node. So we're pretty much done with this section. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the template list. And at this point, what we've done is we've collected a bunch of data that our users are going to be able to fill out when they click on the new page wizard. But at this point, now we've collected all this data. How does OU Campus know where to put this data that we've all collected? And that's where the template list node really comes into play, because inside the template list node, you're going to have these other elements called template. And what the template element does is it configures where that data is going to be sent. Inside of the template element, between the opening and closing tags, what you're going to do is you're going to type the file name of some TMPL file so OU Campus understands, all right, I've collected this data in the TCF, and now I'm going to send it to this particular TMPL file. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add the file name of the TMPL file that we just made a couple minutes ago. And it's called simple.tmpl. And since the two files are in the same directory, you don't need to put any root relative paths or anything in here. All you need to do is the file name. OU Campus already knows that it's looking in the same directory as your TCF exists. So there's no need to put any sort of directory prefix or anything along those lines here in our template element. So at this point, what we can do is, if I wanted to hypothetically create multiple files at the same time as I am publishing, or if I want to create multiple new files at the same time, I could just use multiple template elements to send data to multiple TMPL files, which would then create a new PCF for me for every single TMPL file that I declare here. So right now, at this point, with this new page wizard, I'm only going to create one new file because I only have one template element. If I wanted to create two files, I would just have another template element that would point to some other TMPL file, and that would give me a PCF created from here and also a PCF created from here. But since I only have one TMPL file, we're only going to make one new PCF with this wizard. So before we move on, we're not done yet by just declaring this template element. Just as with most of these other XML nodes, we have some important attributes that we need to add to this one as well. And the syntax for this is more of a personal preference. There are, anywhere between 3 and 4 to all the way up to like 6 or 7 different attributes that you can add to a template element. So sometimes best practice is it's nice to just have each attribute on its own line to make things a little bit easier to see and also a little easier to modify if you need to do that later on down the road. So that's what I'm going to do here, but you can all keep it on the same line if you want to as well. It's once again just a matter of personal preference. The parser doesn't really care either way. So what I'm going to do here is I'm first going to say, all right, we need to know what the file name of our new page is. We know that we're sending data to simple.tmpl, but we also know that it's not going to be called simple.tmpl when we create the new page from this wizard. So there's an attribute that's called file name that's going to take our file name and actually, give our new file that name. If you remember, just up here, I created a variable that's calling for the PCF file name. And what this is doing is what we can do. We can actually declare, or we can essentially call the value of this variable and inject it inside of this other attribute inside of our template element. So the syntax for that, just as you would probably expect, is curly brackets, which is saying, give me the value of this variable, or, give me the value of this thing. If you're talking about XSL, it's curly brackets inside of quotes is kind of the same thing as, the XSL : value of command. And we're just going to take the name attribute, the value of the name attribute for that variable, and put it inside the curly brackets. So that way we know that whatever the user puts in this variable for the file name will become the file name of our new file that we're creating. So there's our first attribute. The second attribute is going to be the extension. So we know that it's going to have this particular file name, but we also need to tell it what extension is going to be appended to that file name when we create the page. Because once again, we know that we're not wanting to create a TMPL file when we finish our wizard. We want it to become a PCF. So we'll do extension equals PCF right there. And so that way it'll take whatever we add for our file name and then give it the extension of .pcf when everything's all said and done. Now the other attribute that we want to add here is called display file name. And display file name is important because by default, OU Campus, when it sees a template element right here, it will automatically inject a field inside the new page wizard that prompts users to enter in a file name. However, the difference between what we're asking up here for the file name and the one that is by default added is that the default one will also include the file extension, so you have the potential to accidentally create a file name with no extension. If you accidentally hit delete too much, or you just remove the last couple of characters of the text that's in that field. And obviously that's a little bit dangerous and can cause errors and a little bit less user-friendly. So what we've done is we've built this variable method out as being a safer method. So we're enforcing the extension. We're just asking for the file name, but users don't have to put in the extension, so we don't run into the issue of creating a file without an extension. So in order to prevent OU Campus from giving us that default one that has the file extension in it, we just have to do display file name equals no in our template element here. And that's not going to display the default one, and it will just have the file name be performed using the variable element that we did up above. And then finally, when we create a new page inside of OU Campus using a wizard, we have kind of the option whether to just be taken back to the pages list view once we create the file, or we have the option to be taken directly to that new file that was just created so we can jump right into starting editing the file. And the way that we kind of control which one of those options happens is through the preferred redirect attribute. And then the options are either yes or no. If you say preferred redirect equals yes, that means that we will be immediately taken to the new page that we've just created as soon as the process completes, which, just takes like a second. If we did preferred redirect equals no, we'd just be taken back to the pages list view as we look at the directory that we were just viewing beforehand, and we would see the new file in the list view, but we just wouldn't be taken to it directly. So just to save us one more mouse click, we'll do preferred redirect equals yes and have that look. All right, so at this point I'm going to save, and there we have it. This is our completed, extremely basic TCF. We're asking for some important information about our page, which is controlled through all of these variable elements up above. And then down here with the template element, we are telling OU Campus to which file that information is going to be sent. So we know that, which is awesome, but at this point, how do we determine where in the TMPL all of these particular variables are going to go? We know they're all going to be sent to simple.tmpl, but how can we control to make sure that the custom page settings for our banner image, how can we make sure that this data is going to be sent to the right place in our page properties? Well, that is why we get to revisit the TMPL file, and we're going to add a special thing called an echo directive in order to get the data to the correct places. So we'll save one more time. I'm going to open up a new tab here really quickly. And I'm going to go back in this new tab to our simple.tmpl. So right now we've got, our generic PCF that is, pretty much bereft of any sort of content or information. And I'm going to add these echo directives, which essentially listen for the TCF's variable data and place that data in the correct places inside of our TMPL file. So what we're going to do first is, if I just kind of quickly reference back, let's just go down the list and take each one of our variables and use an echo directive for each one of them to send that particular information to where it needs to go in our TMPL. So first of all, we're asking for the page title. And page title, since it's part of our metadata, if we go back to the TMPL, it's going to go inside OUC properties, label equals metadata. We've got our title element right here, and it's currently blank. What we're going to do is we're going to add an echo directive inside of this title element, which will then take whatever the user puts in our TCF and plugs it in right there. So the syntax for echo directives is pretty unique. It's a little bit different. It might at first look like a comment like you'd see in HTML. So you've got your bracket, exclamation point, dash, dash. You can see that my syntax highlighting is treating it as a comment for right now. But what we do next is we put a percentage sign and then we write echo. And you can see that now it's turning pink, which means that our syntax highlighting understands that it's something special, and it's now no longer just a simple HTML content or comment. It can do something fancy here. So what we're going to do is, once we have our echo directive, we're going to use the attribute of var, which is essentially say, hey, look for this variable, var variable. We're going to do equal sign quotes, and inside the quotes we're just going to put the name value of whatever variable that we're listening for. So if I go back to my TCF the name variable, or the name attribute for this variable is called title. So I'm just going to copy that, paste that inside of my echo var, and then this is very important, put a space after the closing quotes and then 2 dashes and the end caret, and now we have our fully completed echo directive. The syntax for this is very specific. If you accidentally put a space between the dashes and the percentage sign at the beginning, it'll break. As you can see, it treats it just as a comment after that. But if you don't put one between the end quotes and the ending dashes, that will also break it. So make sure that there's no space at the beginning and there is a space at the end, and that's our syntax. So we finished our first one. We've got our page title in there. Next, we have our variable that asks for the description of our page. And as you would probably expect, that's going to, in our TMPL, go into the meta element for description. And this is where things get a little bit kind of funny, because we're not putting it between an opening and a closing tag. We're putting it as the value of a particular attribute for a tag. So I'm just actually going to copy the formatting from our title one and paste it inside the quotes. You'll notice that you get the syntax highlighting of this quote containing an error, because in normal circumstances XML will not allow you to have, these quotes right here, but then these double quotes inside of it. You can't have nested double quotations like that. This is the one situation in which OU Campus will make an exception. So even though it says it's not going to work because it's got this highlighting here, I promise it will. The only thing we need to do is for our var attribute, we're now no longer grabbing data from the title variable, we're grabbing it from the description variable. So I'll copy that, paste that in here. Now we're going to grab the description data and plug it in where it needs to go here. Now let's move on to our next one. This is our banner image. So I'm going to go to my TMPL, find my parameter for the banner image, and then I'm just going to grab my echo var again. Oopsies. I'll just type it out again. --% echo var equals, and then what's the name of that variable in our TCF? We go here. It looks like its name equals image, so I'll just copy that, paste it inside var, space -- greater than symbol. There we go. So now whatever image that I choose inside of the file chooser is going to show up injected into my page parameter for what the banner image will be. So like the minute that I create the new page, it's already going to have a banner image added there already, which is awesome. Now lastly, you notice that I do have this parameter for heading that I haven't injected any data for. But as I said before, if we have a variable that's asking for the page title in terms of metadata, it would probably follow that we would want, in most cases, the page heading to have the same name as what we're having the title of the page be, since they're both representational for what the page will be. What's really cool is that you don't have to have a simple one-to-one relationship with echo directives and variables. I can have the same echo directive put in multiple places on the TMPL, and it'll just take that data that was entered in once in the TCF and just put it in both places at once, which is, pretty neat. So I'm just got my cursor here between the opening and closing parameter tags for my page heading. I'm just going to, not find that information. I'm going to paste it right there. So now my page title is going to be added as the page heading, and it's also going to be the page title inside my TMPL. Okay, let's go ahead and save our TMPL. Let's just go back here to review, make sure we didn't miss any. Since we've got this extra variable that we haven't done an echo directive for, but remember, we're only asking for the PCF file name. We don't necessarily need to have the file name of the page injected anywhere on the page itself. We're really only using it to put into our template node in the TCF so we can actually, have an actual file name. So with that, we've filled out all of our variables. We've put all of the relevant information that needs to go into our page into the places where it should go on the page. and we've also built out our TCF. So let's just save both of those files. I'm going to hop back to the pages list view here. And now we're pretty much almost done. I've built out my TCF and my TMPL. Those are great. There is just one other file that we need to add to have our new page template fully ready to go, and that's just simply an image file. If you recall, if you've ever used, if you've ever made new content inside OU Campus, when you click the new button and your templates appear, there's a little image thumbnail that just, shows you what that thumbnail or what that file should be. Maybe it has a preview of what that page will look like, or it'll just have a nice little vector graphic or something. Whatever it may be, it's just a simple image thumbnail that is linked in with the new page wizard. So I'm going to go ahead and upload a file too. So I've got this icon that I've built out already. It's a .gif. It can be .gif, .png, .jpeg, whatever, as long as it's a standard image format. We're going to upload that into the same folder that we have our TCF and TMPL. And the way that OU Campus understands what image is linked in with the particular new page wizard, the simple way to do that is by giving it the same file name. So OU Campus will by default link in image files that have the same file name as TCFs and associate those automatically. So I'm going to rename my file from icon.gif to simple.gif, and of course spelled correctly. And there we have it, and I can just review what that looks like. As we can see, I got this little thing that says new simple page. Pretty standard, pretty straightforward, but gets me what I need. So I don't need to use those files anymore. I can just check them back into the system. But now we have all of our files that we necessarily need to create a new page template. So let's go ahead and test everything out. The first step to make sure that everything is working and testable is we're actually going to go into the site settings for our site to configure one particular thing. So when I go into my site settings, underneath the production server FTP settings panel right here, if we scroll down, we've got two options down here in site settings that are very important. The first one is called the template location, and this controls whether OU Campus is looking for template files on the staging server or on the production server. We've just, spent the last 40 minutes or so building out template files on our staging server, so we just want to make sure that the template location is set to local, which it is, which is great. And once we've done that, then we get to determine what directory OU Campus is looking for those template files. So as we can see, it is already appended, _resources/OU/templates. So any template files that are located in this templates folder will automatically be recognized by OU Campus as being a template file, as well as anything that's in a subdirectory off of this templates directory. So if in OU Campus I had, resources/OU/templates/blog or something like that, and had all my blog specific templates located in here, I could still just define this as my template directory, and OU Campus will recognize any of those files that are in there. However, if I had a template file that was in _resources/templates as opposed to /OU/templates, those files would not show up in the system as being template files because they're located in a different directory that OU Campus does not see here. So, this all looks great, staging server, and it's the correct directory, so I don't need to change anything here, but I've confirmed, which is a very important step. Next, I'm going to go to Setup Templates, and this is where I can just confirm that the image thumbnail is associated properly, and I can also configure some additional options. So in here, I can see that simple.tcf is recognized as a template file, which is awesome, so we know that everything that we just confirmed worked out appropriately. My simple new page that's right here, this is actually being pre-filled from that title element that we actually wrote by hand in our TCF. If I want to, I can override it here. It won't manually override it in the TCF itself, but I can just change it to something else if I wanted to. So in this case, my image says new simple page, so I might as well change this to say new simple page as well. I can change the access group, which allows me to configure which users will have the ability to create new pages using this template. Since the access right now is set to everyone, that means that all users can create a new page using this template, as long as they of course have access to creating new pages in the first place. We've got our image. As you can see, it's automatically linked in with simple.tcf because it was called simple.gif. And then finally, if I wanted to, I could manually overwrite this image to be a different image, and I would just enter in the URL for that image in here. But right now, I took all the time to upload that image, so I might as well just keep it as is. So we know that it exists, and we know that it's being recognized. I changed the title, so I'll save it here. The next thing I want to do is I want to assign that template to what's called a template group. And template groups are something that administrators can build out to configure which areas on the site certain templates can be used. So I can build out a template group that has all of my faculty directory templates, which may be specific and different than a standard interior page. And I could assign that template group to the faculty directory portion of my site. So that way, when users go to the faculty directory, they can only make new pages that are meant for faculty directories. And vice versa, if they're not in the faculty directory, they won't see the faculty directory templates available for them to choose from, which is good because they should only be in the faculty directory in the first place. So let's go ahead and make a template group. I don't have any in my site right now because I just built out my first template. I'm going to click the new button. I'm just going to give the template group a name, which I'll just call generic since I don't have any other specific ones. And then I just simply need to click the checkbox of the template that I want to exist in my group. And then we can also click the show new folder button. That's really not relevant to what we're doing here. I'll click create. Now I have a template group. This subscribers button right here says 0, and that means that I do not have any directories that I have assigned this template group to, which is fine because we just made it. We're going to go ahead and change that right now. I'm going to hop to the pages list view, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to go ahead and actually make a new folder really quickly. I'll just call it test. And inside that test directory, I'm going to go to the access settings by hovering over the folder, going to edit and then access. And then down in here, we have this little template group. I'm going to change it from inherit from parent, which essentially just means inherit it from the site settings. And if there's nothing set at the site level, it'll just be all templates that are available. And I'm just going to change it to this generic template group right here. I'll go to save. And then when I click inside of test and click the new button, I now have my new simple page showing up here within my dialog box. So now let's click it and see how it works. As soon as we click it, we can see that we have our new page wizard. This should be familiar to most of you at this point. And now we have our 3 main sections. So simple new page right there, that was still once again what's in the title element of the TCF itself. There's my first section that I called metadata. You'll remember that that's defined by the section attribute that was on that variable. There's my page title, which is defined by the prompt attribute. Here's my alt text that was defined by the alt attribute. And since it's a text field, I'm just going to put in my page title right here. Once again, I've got my description, my alt text for that description, and it's another text area, but this one is taller, and that's because we had that rows attribute, which defined the text box to be 3 lines of text tall, which essentially, if I do this, we can see that that exactly is how large it is. Then next we have another heading for custom page settings. This is defined by this section attribute inside of my banner image. And now I've got a file chooser for banner image. Let's just go to resources, images. I'll just choose the smallest of these other images that I can find. Okay, let's just use graduating in style. Why not? I'll choose my file. There's my dependency tag because I used my dependency attribute to say, yes, I want to use dependency tags. And then finally, the final section of the page configuration. My file name is right here. It had the default information of new file added to it, which is what I did in the TCF by having data between the opening and closing tags of this variable. I'm just going to give it the title of test page. And once again, I don't need to use the extension because that's going to be done for us behind the scenes. And then everything underneath options that's right here, this is stuff that OU Campus automatically adds to every new page wizard. It's nothing that you can control from the TCF itself. It's always going to show up. I'm just going to leave these at the default because we don't need to worry about them for right now. Let's click Create and see how things worked. So now it created a new file for me. The preferred redirect is sending me to the exact page that we had before. And as you can see, I've added my banner image already. There's my page heading, which was also my page title. I have two editable regions, which are pretty much blank at this point, but if I wanted to, I could go ahead and add some content in here. And this functions just as if I had made this page 3 years ago, or maybe 3 months ago, and was just editing a piece of content that was already here. There we go, look at that. I can go into page properties. There's my title and my description, added appropriately. There's my page heading, my banner image. I could go ahead and change these if I wanted to. But essentially, that's it. What we've done is we've taken a working PCF file and, we've already had it linked to an XSL file. What we've done is we've transformed that PCF into a TMPL. And the best part is that we never needed to touch XSL throughout this entire process. The reason why we didn't need to do that is because, the TMPL already had the XSL declared for it. So we already knew it was using the same file to style it as the previous one did. Then, after we built our TMPL, kind of removed all of the non-generic content from it, we then built out a TCF from scratch. We asked the questions that we wanted to ask. We told the TCF where or what file that data was going to be sent to. And then we went back to the TCF and added echo directives. Finally, we uploaded an image, and from there on out, we just tested everything, and it looks like it works wonderfully. So with that, I hope that this was an informative little course here. I hope that you've gone from understanding just the simple basics of XML and XSL, which are the foundations of OU Campus, going from that to learning how to take a simple static file and make editable regions and page properties in OU Campus. And then from there, I hope that this has been informative for you to learn how to take that page and create a template from it, all from within OU Campus. So enjoy, and stay posted for more tutorials in the future.